Good morning and welcome to Quick Connect. Today we're going to be talking with Tim Daniel from the Widener SBDC about the business model canvas. I want to thank everyone who's joining us on Facebook and on Zoom. I want to let you know that this session is being recorded. So if you're not interested in being part of a recorded event, you can go ahead and exit out now, but we hope you'll stick around and join us for this great topic today. Again, we'll be talking about the business model canvas today. If you're joining us on Facebook, I'd like to invite you to make any comments into the comment section, or you can add questions there as well. Same on Zoom. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop those into the Q&A section and we will take those as they arrive. So as I said, today we're joined by Tim Daniel from the Widener SBDC. He's going to be talking us through his expertise in the business models canvas, which is a really fun topic, and we're excited to present that to you today. You're joining us as part of the Penn State SBDC Small Business Services. If you're not familiar with some of our services, we offer free confidential one-on-one business consulting, training, information, resources, and referral services. So if you haven't connected with us and you're a business owner or you're looking to start a business, we encourage you to reach out to us and get started with a business consultant. So I'd like to start by welcoming Tim Daniel to our call. Tim, how are you doing today?
I guess it's afternoon now, so good afternoon, Elizabeth. I'm doing great. Glad to be here and to share this great tool with your audience.
Yeah, it's exciting, and I know it's kind of a fun topic, especially for excuse me, I wanted to grab my notes. For people who are just getting started with the business model canvas, I think it's a really fun topic to explore. So why don't you start by kind of introducing yourself, tell a little bit about your background, your experience, and what you do at the SBDC out there in Widener.
Great. Yeah, so I recently joined the Widener SBDC back in May. Prior to that, I had worked with the Wharton SBDC before it closed, and there a lot of our work was focused on early stage organizations that were really trying to figure out a concept and whether it fit in the market and how to sort of build a business around it. And what's fascinating to me is that if we fast forward from my time at Wharton to my now time at Widener, we're still using the same tools, but we're using a lot of them to help existing businesses who are absolutely caught up in all of today's events and really needing to look at this concept of pivoting. So we're able to see the tools add a lot of value there. And in addition to what I do with small business, we're also deploying these tools into big corporates who struggle with the same thing. And surprisingly, even though they have more resources, in some ways have more challenges in terms of how to create value and how to pivot.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that kind of brief overview of you and what you do. Can we start with, the easy question, what is a business model canvas?
Sure, I'm just gonna put a few slides up, so hopefully everybody can see that. That's fine. So it's a pretty simple tool on the surface. It's just 9 boxes. And in those 9 boxes, we can describe how an organization creates its value, who it's serving, and then also how the organization itself is capturing value. So it's really looking at both sides, the intended customer value as well as the organization value. And just as a quick background, it came out of a PhD thesis in the early 2000s by a gentleman by the name of Alex Osterwalder, who then went on to write a really well-known book called Business Model Generation in about 2008 or 2009. And what I like about the tool is we can take the simplest of businesses. I like to joke that we could take someone selling bottles of water on a street corner and do a business model canvas, or we could use that same 9-box tool to describe something as complex as Google or Apple.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting since I joined the SBDC and really started looking at these different types of ways to help businesses get started and to make pivots, and just to see how the different tools, and this tool has really come out as one of the main tools that we can use when looking at different business models. So who uses the business model canvas? I know we've kind of just briefly alluded to it can be used for current businesses and startups. Can you go a little bit more in depth on that?
Yeah, I'm going to actually just leave this up while I talk through that a bit so that people can kind of grasp the 9 boxes. But I think there's really 2 different audiences or 2 different what I call use cases. One of them is And this is the sort of way we started with these tools, was with organizations, and they don't have to be companies, but they usually are, that are new. They may not even be a company yet, they're just a concept. And this really, the classic instruction, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later, is we'll write a business plan. Well, that's great if you have a lot of the answers, but if you don't have the answers, you can use the business model canvas to start mapping out, what is your business going to do? What is it going to require in the way of resources? What about the revenue streams? What about the costs? So you can quickly get that high level view. And I think most importantly, once you've got that, you can iterate on it and try the sort of what if. Well, what if we went business to business, or what if we changed from business to business consumer? So this idea of being able to iterate, and I'll speak to that a little bit more in my next slide. So that's for our classic kind of young businesses, the startups. And even with, I would say, traditional Main Street businesses, they have to really answer these same questions. And what's going to be unique about them? What might they be doing different? And then if we look at the existing businesses, people who've been around perhaps for years or decades, and obviously they can be running in many respects on autopilot until something happens. And we've clearly seen that situation in all of our lives over the last 6 to 8 months. And then we can go back and pull out our business model canvas and say, okay, what's changed? What are our new opportunities? Or what are the new threats that we're under? So for an existing business, it can be about survival, or it can be about how do we grow.
Yeah, I think that's great. And one of your points that you kind of started out with is that there's no business too small or a business too large to utilize this tool, which is kind of cool about using the canvas. So you have this picture up. Can you explain a little bit on how you use the canvas?
Yeah, I just want to, before I do that, I want to show this slide a bit, because I think it speaks to the beauty of the canvas. And when we're talking about a new business or a business undergoing a lot of change, or in that messy explore part, that squiggly part, we're dealing with a lot of unknowns, and we're trying to sort of get confidence and clarity. And so I think the beauty here of this tool is that it lets us visually depict things and really develop that clarity. And I'll just go back up. So, what we're trying to do with this tool is capture the key parts of a business in those 9 boxes. Who is our customer? What is the value we're providing to them? How do we find those customers, our distribution channels? And once we've found them, what is our means of interaction? So that's the upper right-hand part of the canvas. And that's what we often call the front of the business, or in a restaurant or theater, it's the audience, or the front of house, as they say. And then on the left-hand side, we talk about, well, how are we going to produce that product or service? What do we have to do every day or every week? What are the key resources? And one of my favorite boxes is the partner box. Who's going to help us do this? And we're not necessarily talking about your business partners that are in the business, but we're talking about third parties who are outside of the business that can bring something very important to you. Maybe they're bringing you access to customers. Maybe they're bringing you particular supplies. But it's pretty unusual to find a business that doesn't have key partners. And then last but not least, and this is the part that we often start with in our business plans, but we usually do them a little bit later when we do a business model canvas, is our cost structure and our revenue structure. So it's really about working through those 9 boxes. There's a couple of different orders that you can do it in, but then really sort of staying at that sort of 10,000-foot level to sort of zero in on the key aspects. And what are the things that if we're starting, we need to focus on, or if we're pivoting, we need to change first.
Yeah, that's great. I really like the partners, how you focus on that as well, because it's kind of something that a lot of businesses do miss out on, figuring out how to utilize those partners to help grow and explore. So we kind of talked a little bit about how to use the business model canvas. Can you use more than one for a business?
I'm gonna come to that in a second and actually walk through an example, but I didn't fully answer your first question, or one of your earlier questions. I did want to touch on this, and this is about risk. And And it also kind of speaks to the front of house, back of house. What is it we're building? Who wants it? Can we build it? And then can we make money? So I think that's the other nice thing about this tool, is it lets us really get into these three fundamental questions. But to go to your point about how we would create a more complex model, I'm going to use an example now. It's not a small business, but it's one that we can all relate to, and that's Amazon. So if we think back to the mid-1990s, wow, a long time ago, we remember Amazon started off as this big book warehouse, online book sales, all the books in the world kind of thing. And, you know, they had a business model for that. And what's interesting, if we fast forward, obviously they've expanded from books to all other forms of sort of retail e-commerce, but they've also gone through some pretty big business model evolutions with some new services. And that's kind of why I want to illustrate how in a more mature business, we may have multiple business models. And in that case, we'll need to do multiple versions of our canvas. So if we think about Amazon, you know, in the book business, or even in its sort of retail, you know, selling, you know, me a new set of headphones or a cookbook or whatever, it was about retail sales. It was selling to the mass market, to the consumers. Those sales occurred through Amazon.com. And, you know, they made a small markup. They make a very small markup on all of those items. So that's the traditional model that as consumers we're looking at Amazon with. And now obviously there's other services and like video and audio. But I wanted to show you with this example how Amazon decided to build a whole new business model. And we're going to focus on the web services piece. And I think this shows how we can take an existing business model, like what they were doing for books and retail, and how they converted it into a brand new business model. And again, you know, there was this idea that we can take an existing company and we can invent and innovate. Sometimes we're doing that, you know, consciously or proactively. Other times we're doing it reactively like we are today. But for Amazon, this was going from a business to consumer approach to a business to business approach. So the first thing we start to see is, okay, if we look at their prior business model, you know, one of the challenges with selling books and retail stuff at very low margins is that it's not, you know, you don't have a lot of profit margin coming in there. But one of the things that Amazon realized is that in building out that massive retail business, they had this world-class, interesting IT infrastructure. So they're saying, okay, not great margins in e-commerce, but guess what we have? We have this infrastructure. And so then they went on and said, okay, what if we put that infrastructure into a B2B setting? And we could increase our margins when we do that by focusing on distributing our IT services. What we're currently using what we're previously using, for our e-commerce business, we're going to create a new business-to-business business called AWS. So IT services becomes their new value proposition. It's delivered through the internet. There's not necessarily a person knocking on my door, and they're focusing on, you know, initially internet companies, and now any big company or any small companies are using that AWS service. So we can start to see how parts of their prior business model, like the IT infrastructure, created this new value proposition and a new customer segment. And then obviously there's a different revenue stream. It's the utility fees, which, you know, from an Amazon perspective are great because they're higher profit margins. So in this case, if we were trying to describe Amazon, we would need to do multiple business model canvases to show the different types of customers, the different value propositions. But what we could do then is see what's in common between those business models. What do we have that we can reuse across different customer segments and different value propositions?
Wow, that's pretty cool. So are you saying that Amazon made their biggest shifts through using a business model canvas, or we don't know that? We're just able to illustrate the
Yeah,
opportunities.
I think we've reverse engineered. I don't know that they doesn't necessarily share that they had a business model canvas, but I think what Amazon and we see a lot of other really nimble companies doing is that they're using these concepts and looking at how they can quickly come up with new models and test them. And certainly Amazon's had things where they did try new business models that didn't work and they've just moved on. So I think the point here is with a business model canvas, we can very quickly sketch things out, say, okay, what do we need to do to test that concept? And then decide if we want to invest more time and effort into it.
Absolutely. It's so nice to be able to see it visually play out too. And I love the idea, and we'll get into a little bit more in a minute, but we using Post-its so you can kind of move those different components around a bit. Um, so, so yeah. I have another question. Does the business model canvas replace the formal business plan?
Great question. So this is a diagram I often use to answer that. So, and I've had probably in my 15 plus years of working with small businesses, I don't know how many hundreds of times people have said, oh, I need to write a business plan. And I believe that business plans are very important, particularly if you're going to be seeking a loan or something else. But I think the interesting question is, well, what's going to go into that plan and how do we have the clarity to make sure we can do it well? And oftentimes people try and sit down and with all that blank piece of paper and write a plan. And the first thing they do is they turn to Google and they just basically start copying and pasting things in from other plans. And that may or may not be a good plan. In my experience, it's usually not a very good plan. But if we can start with a business model canvas, it really lets us get the most important concepts down on paper. Now, obviously, we don't have room in those 9 boxes to write paragraphs and paragraphs. That goes into our plan. But we can start to see how each one of the boxes in our business model canvas can map back to a section in a traditional business plan. And one of my favorite examples of that is the marketing section in a business plan. And people often write very big statements like, oh, we're going to use social media. And they say things that on the surface sound good, but they're not very specific or they're not very detailed. But if we've done our business model canvas and another tool that supports it called the value proposition canvas, then it's pretty straightforward for us to write the marketing section because we know who our customer is, we know how we're going to reach those customers, our channels, and we know what our value proposition is. So that's literally what goes into the marketing section of your business plan and so forth for the other parts of the business plan.
Yeah, as you're talking through that, it reminds me of, back in high school when I used to have to write a report, but first I would make those little 3x5 index cards.
Right.
And it just that would be my notes section, and then it would play into the bigger report. So the business model canvas seems similar tool, kind of getting you started, organizing your thoughts. And then, if you do need to write a more formal business plan, it kind of plays into that more formal plan. So can you explain how the value proposition plays into the business model canvas?
Great. Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. And when I'm working with small businesses or teaching, I love talking about the value proposition part of this because to me, it's so important. And while the business model canvas is pretty well known, well, it's well known in some circles, the value proposition and its supporting canvas is not as well known. And so it came second. It came a few years after the business model generation book was written, when the folks who came up with the business model canvas realized that those 2 boxes, the value proposition at the middle of the canvas and the customer segment at the right, were just not really sufficient to drive the story that you needed or the insight. So they said, okay, let's come, rather than try and add more into those 2 little boxes, let's come up with a new canvas. And so they came up with the circle and the square. And the square is, usually where we start talking about this as entrepreneurs. We talk about, this is my company, and this is my great product or service, and this is why you should buy it. And we capture that why you should buy it in this concept of gain creators or pain relievers. and which is all well and good. You know, we need to have a good sense of what we're building and why it's important to people. However, what's beautiful about the value proposition canvas is that there's an equally important part on the right, the circle, which is the customer profile. So this really forces us to answer questions like, who are my customers? And what are they trying to do in their life that I'm going to help them with? So I like to say, we want to take our value map, the square, and put it in a drawer and lock it away, and then go out and look in the real world and try and develop that detailed customer profile, the circle side. And so that we talk about who is the customer, what are the jobs that they're trying to do in their life? I mean, if I go to McDonald's, I'm trying to do a certain job. If I'm going to a sit down, well, I don't know if we do it anymore, but if I'm going to a more formal dining experience, yes, I'm still trying to get fed, but I probably have some other jobs that I'm trying to do in my life. So that's really forces us to put the customer's perspective first. And then as they try and accomplish those jobs, what are the things that stand in the way, the pains, or the things that they want to avoid? And then what are what I call the positive moments, oh, wow, that was a really great meal, or I really liked that new website I went to. I'm going to tell my friends about it. Those are the gains. And then if we really get this right and we've understood our customer well, and then we've crafted our value proposition, the value map, so that it matches, we have this thing called fit, which means we know who our customer is and we know what they need, what's important to them, and we're really delivering that in a very, very focused way. And even for existing businesses, we often see that over time, fit starts to diminish. They may have done a great job at this in the beginning, but their customers may have evolved, or the market has changed, and yet their value map, the left-hand side hasn't changed. So this is an important extension to the business model canvas. And I would say using the two together is really where you want to probably be if you're using these tools.
Yeah, I think we spoke about that a little bit the other day too, I asked you, do you start with the business model canvas? Do you start with the value prop in Canvas? And you kind of alluded to the fact that it depends, right? It depends on how well you know your customer and that sort of thing.
It does, and I'm going to just walk through a quick example. So this is a pizza restaurant, and this would have been pre-COVID. So it's a neighborhood pizza restaurant. They know that it's the families that maybe we wanted to go out to celebrate a report card. But it's important to stay on a budget. This isn't sort of a big spend item for these families. So it's that kind of blend of fun but cost conscious neighborhood dining that we're all familiar with. And if we think about in that setting pre-COVID, what would have turned people off? Well, maybe it was a noisy restaurant, the food wasn't very good from time to time, or the menu was limited, so not everybody could get something that was friendly to them. And what would have been positive? Well, okay, it meets my budget, it's good for families, and maybe they offer beer and wine or something for happy hour for the parents. So this would have been a pretty typical pre-COVID customer profile. Now, if I was running a pizza restaurant and suddenly I have to look at, well, families aren't going to be coming in anymore, what's changed? What about my new customer is the same and what is different? So if we look at this customer profile, we'll see that they still want to get something to eat. They still want to celebrate a special occasion, but now they want to stay safe at home. They're not interested in going out. And I think they also want to have this sort of relaxing and enjoying time. And then we can, from there map out, well, with this new way of celebrating through food, what can go wrong? Well, my order might come late. It could be cold. I still have to do all this sort of cleaning up. And then there's some positive things like, oh, wow, I can get all different kinds of food from this restaurant, the wide menu choice and so forth. So what we've done here is taken our pre-COVID customer profile and updated it to reflect for this particular customer segment what's now important to them. And we can immediately start to see the change. And if we continue down that road, we can say, okay, how do I create a new value map? So now it's going to be about family-friendly takeout and maybe special occasion meals, and what's going to be, attractive to my new customer profile based on that. So maybe I can do easy to heat up meals so we don't have to worry about them arriving cold. People can, and the family can order different menu choices. This is just, some hypothetical ways that we could change our restaurant to address that change in the customer profile. So in this case, if we came up with this new value proposition canvas, we would go back to our business model canvas and say, okay, what has to change in our business model? What do we have to keep and what do we have to add or delete to deliver on this new value proposition?
That makes total sense. I think that that we can definitely see the need for making pivots with these and how it just simplifies some of those ideas a little bit more rather than just kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. Now, we have discussed that you can also use the business model canvas kind of on yourself as a personal business model.
Right. Yeah, that's a great suggestion, because I think particularly for entrepreneurs, many of them are starting off, as a company of one, and they're really bringing their passion and their heart and soul to whatever they're doing. And so one of the complementary books that came along after the business model generation book is a book called Business Model You. And it's really, again, using those 9 boxes to say, okay, I'm Tim Daniel, I'm a small business consultant. Who is my customer? How do I find my customers? How do I help them? So we're just slightly tuning the vocabulary to match that solo entrepreneur approach. And even if we're going to be starting an organization that's bigger with employees, it can often be useful to take a step back and use the business model canvas to sort of draw out your own personal model. What is it you're willing to give up, which in many cases is our time, or maybe you do have some assets you want to contribute. What is the audience you want to help? How do you want to help them? So I think we kind of skip through this stuff sometimes when we're starting a business, but I think it can be really useful to go back and sort of ground yourself in that personal business model.
Yeah, and you keep kind of showing some reference books as well, and these are all out there available on the internet. We can also make sure you get the resources towards the end of the chat. If you're joining us online on Facebook, please, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. And if you're on Zoom, you're welcome to add any questions to the Q&A feature. So you and I talked the other day about different ways to use the business model canvas, and I went back to a client right after, soon after, and I was describing to her how you can use the business model canvas on your competition. So you noted a few different ways to kind of reverse engineer the business model canvas or use it in a different way. Can you kind of expand on some of those?
Sure. I won't use slides for this one, but just kind of talk it through. So, the place we usually start is on our own business. But actually, if you're trying to learn how to use the tool, sometimes it's more accessible and interesting to look at other businesses. And maybe you look at your competition and you say, okay, who are the other people doing something similar to me, and what is their business model? For example, how do they find their customers? Who are their key partners? So understanding the market we're playing in and reverse engineering the business models of our competition can be really, really useful. And then another place that can be useful to use it is if we're selling to someone, particularly in a business-to-business setting. So if I'm selling a product or service to a business, do I understand how that business works? What's important to them? Who are the customers of that business? Because the more I understand the business model of my customers and the value proposition of my customers, the more I can make sure that what I'm selling to them is a good fit. So it's really useful from that perspective to not only reverse engineer competition, but to understand your would-be business customer. And then I think another place that I like to use this is when we're trying to communicate the concepts of our business to an audience that doesn't want to read a 25-page plan. but we need to describe how our business works. And there's two particular audiences that I've seen this being really useful for. One of them is investors or third parties like partners. So you're saying, hey, I want to make you a partner, but let me explain to you what my company does and how we work. So you might pull out a business model canvas and walk through what you're doing and then say, hey, this is why I want you as a partner. Another interesting application is if you're onboarding a new employee and you're trying to get them to quickly grasp, what are we all about here? The business model canvas can be useful for that too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The employee point also struck me the other day when we were chatting, just, for more complicated business models, where it's not just we sell pizza, it would be very beneficial for an employee to walk through something along those lines and understand all the key resources and partners. And I do have a client who was, is ready to schedule an appointment to work through a business model on her potential competition. She's starting up and she really doesn't know where to go in a new town because she's new to town as well. So definitely so many different uses of it. So do you want to walk us through an actual canvas?
Sure. So I'm actually going to do one, much like if we were in the room together, we would do it. I'm a big fan of using the tools physically, either with stickies at a whiteboard or, on a tabletop. And so we're going to just do the tabletop here. And the important thing about this tool is that we're interacting with it physically. We're using the Post-it notes. We're not just conceptually talking it through, because there's something about that, picking it up as Post-it note, putting it on a block, moving it around, that really brings the tool to life. And it's part of the beauty of it. Unlike a written business plan, we have that flexibility and that ability to visualize. So I'd like to use the example, and I apologize, I usually have a screenshot of what this business is, but imagine that you were starting a mobile cell phone repair service. Again, pre-COVID example may or may not be, actually might be very applicable now because people don't want to go into a store as much. They want someone to come to them. So let's say you were starting a mobile phone, cell phone repair business where you had a van and you were going out to your customers and literally pulling into their driveway or in front of their apartment, somehow getting the phone, probably they leave it outside for you, you take it into your van, you fix it, and then drop it right back off to them already repaired. So they don't have to go out of the house, you go to them. So kind of mashing up a couple different business concepts. So if we were doing that in our canvas, we typically start with the value proposition and the customer segment. So what is our value proposition? I've actually made up a list of different things here, but generally we're saying it's quick and convenient cell phone repair. That's the core of what we're providing. It's quick because we're going to do it essentially while we're at your residence or your business place, and it's convenient because you don't even have to leave your work or your home to get it. Now, who is our target customer? So if we're thinking about a business like this, it's not going to necessarily be something where we're going to serve people in another city or another state. So we might say, okay, we're going to target people within 10 miles of where we are because we don't want to be driving too far. But we may be, for example, in a college town. So maybe we're going to target college students as well because we know that they break their cell phones a lot. So kind of two different ways of identifying our customer segment. One is around geography and distance, and the other is around a particular type of consumer. And again, depending on our business model canvas, how we choose to categorize and our customer segment can vary. It could be based on age, it could be based on gender, it could be based on sort of lifestyle interests, income. There's a lot of different ways. The important thing is we're trying to get a very clear understanding of who our customers are. And one of the reasons that that's important is that it helps us figure out how we're going to reach those customers. So in the case of our mobile cell phone business, we may say, okay, we're going to be using online advertising, search engine ads, maybe social media posts. But we know, based, for example, on college students being one of our segments, online advertising might work. Other businesses, maybe we're going to put a big sign outside the business or up on the highway near the business. So our channel there might be traditional outdoor advertising. And another interesting channel we might want to encourage is word of mouth. So one of the things I want to stop and say is, you notice that I'm only putting one item on each post-it. And that's great, because then if I say, well, actually it's not going to be word of mouth, I can just take it off. Another point I'd like to make is we're only usually adding in our finished model anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 items per box. We might start off with 10 or 15 different things, but the whole point of the canvas is to get us to focus on the key items and not get distracted by the minutia. So we're going to typically end up with just a handful of items in each box. So we're going to find our customers through word of mouth and this online advertising. Now, how are we going to interact with them? And again, this was a pre-COVID example. So it was going to be this face-to-face repair and sales. We might want to just change that to being, on site, but not face-to-face, socially distant repair and sales. And the reason that we want to be clear about our relationships is that there can be a lot of different relationships. I always use the example of earlier in the year, back in January, I drove from New Mexico back to Pennsylvania, and I stopped to buy gas multiple times. And so my relationship with the gas station was once it was transactional and it was completely humanless. I would pull into the gas station, put my card into the machine, pump my gas, get in the car and drive off. So it was a very different relationship, for example, than I might have in that neighborhood pizza restaurant. Nothing wrong with the gas station relationship. It was good for both of us. It worked, but it just stresses how much relationships can vary depending on our business model. So that's our front of business. What are we delivering? Who we're delivering it to? How we find those customers or how they find us? And then how are we relating to them once we have them as a customer? There is one other thing we'll put into the relationship. We'll put in our refer a friend program. So we may say, okay, if you make a referral to us, we'll give you $10 off your next repair. So some kind of a loyalty program. We often see this in many of our businesses these days. So that's the front end of our business. Now let's move over to the back end, or how we actually deliver on our service. So let's start with, what are the key activities? What are the things that we need to do every day to make this business work? Well, one of the really important ones is we have to be completing the phone repairs. If we don't understand that, we're going to be pretty unhappy in our business if we suddenly figure out that, oh, that's really what it's about. Mm-hmm. Another one that we need to do, because it's marketing, is maybe maintaining our social media. And now we start to see the connections. So we're using online advertising as our channel. Well, okay, then we need to be understanding the maintenance of that as a key activity. Completing the cell phone repairs relates back to our value proposition. So we start to see how every box connects to another box on our canvas. So what are the important things that we need to make our business work? What do we have to have? So, well, we need people. Either I need to, or maybe I need to hire people who are skilled technicians. We also need parts. We need to be able to get parts quickly and easily. So if we have technicians and parts, those are our key resources. If we move over to our partners, that's an interesting box. Well, okay, if we think about we need parts, well, maybe one of our key partners might be our parts suppliers. Because if we know that we have a very reliable parts supplier, we don't necessarily have to stock a lot of inventory. And that makes our business model more competitive. And then maybe we say also, our local business association is a key partner, because they're going to help us with some of this marketing. And they help us with the marketing, so they become a key partner. Okay, and then we go down to the last part. So what do we have to spend money on? And this one we could probably put in the wages for our technicians. I didn't do a sticky for that, but maybe I'll do one here in a moment. We have this lovely looking van. We have to pay for that. Let me just do one for wages, just show you how we do them on the fly. Okay. And then how do we make revenue? We make revenue from our repair fees. Okay. That's pretty much our revenue model. We sell labor and parts. So that's a quick business model canvas. Now, one of the interesting things is we can say, okay, that looks pretty good, but there's not a lot of revenue here. What could we add potentially to make the revenue more interesting? Well, maybe we can sell used phones, because perhaps there are times where we're taking a phone, we can't repair it, or the person wants to just trade it in. We can do sales of used phones. And then another thing we might think about is, well, how can I improve my value proposition? Because there's lots of other people who do cell phone repair. What can I do that would be different? Well, maybe I want to do loaner phones. So even if I can't fix it on the spot, I'll give you a phone to tide you over until we get the parts and can fix it for you. So those are a couple of quick tweaks we made to our business model canvas after we sort of finished the first round. So that's a quick run through of how we might map out, again, our mobile cell phone repair business.
That's nice. I thank you so much for walking us through that. I think it's very, very helpful to see, number one, how quick it is, and number two, how easy it is, especially if you know your business well and you know your value proposition and your customer segments. You can quickly see that you needed to add some revenue streams, maybe increase your value proposition. So that's very helpful. So what do you do with this once you're done with it? So if you were a business and you just completed this, what would you do next?
Well, I think the important thing is we don't just put it in a drawer and forget about it. I think there's a couple ways we can use it. One is it can help us focus. So if I'm starting our mobile cell phone repair business, I might say, what are the things on this canvas that I'm least confident about? Maybe I'm not confident about how I'm going to attract my customers. That's often times where we struggle. So what can I then go do to build more certainty around my channels? So it helps us focus. And then we may say, okay, we've gotten that cleared up. What's the next thing? Well, maybe I need to work on my key partnerships. So keeping the canvas in front of you and using it as a guide in terms of what activities you want to be doing next and where to focus your time can be very, very useful. As entrepreneurs, our number one challenge is using our time well. And I think the canvas makes us really get clarity around what's important and are we across it or not. And then as our business kind of gets up and running, maybe we put the canvas away a little bit, but then we pull it out periodically to say, okay, is something shifted here? Is our business model kind of creeping into a new place, or is our customer segment changing? So maybe we say, okay, we want to have a retail storefront in addition to our mobile van service. So we would take out our canvas and we'd say, what parts of our business model canvas can we bring over to our retail storefront? So as we look at growing or pivoting, reusing and re-looking at our canvas can be very powerful.
Yeah, that kind of answered my next question is, as to how often you should use it. And it just goes to that point that you have to kind of keep an eye on it and just see if things are changing. So say I do notice that things are changing in my business, and should I use the business model canvas to get back to where they were, or would you recommend using it to open yourself up into changes and pivots?
Well, I think absolutely its power is in its ability to quickly prototype different concepts and do that what if conversation in a very structured way. I think if there's one place that there's no other tool that I think structures that, it's the business model canvas. We can say, okay, what if we shifted from being a sit-down restaurant to a completely takeout-based business? What do we take off of our canvas? What do we add to it? What if we wanted to expand from one customer segment to another? Do we need to change our relationships? Do we need to change our channels? Do we need to change the people we have, our key resources? So I definitely think as we brainstorm and do that kind of what if, it's a very, very valuable tool.
Yeah, I think that's true. And to your point, now we're making pivots. And so what if we do want to take say a restaurant from being a sit down restaurant to completely take out? It may sound like you're, decreasing business, but there are opportunities there also to increase. So, being able to realize those shifts are very valuable to a business. Yeah, I was just talking about this idea the other day of ghost kitchens, and in that concept. So that's interesting. So if you're joining us on Facebook, or if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to join those in now. Tim, did you want to revisit any other topics before we finish up today?
I think if there's one topic I like to stress, it's this idea of understanding risk, prioritization and risk. I constantly come back to that as I work with entrepreneurs. So the business model canvas really lets us look at actually 4 different types of risk, 3 inherent in the canvas. One is, and this is the #1 killer, is do I really have something that people want? And are they able to find me? And can I relate to them? Which is desirability. And we know that the #1 reason new businesses fail is because they get this wrong. They think they understand their market, but they don't really understand it well enough. The second thing it helps us do is understand, okay, I know I have a good product. I know people want it. I know how to reach those people, but is it practical for me to deliver it, which is what we call feasibility. And then viability is, is the market big enough? Are my cost structures in line with my revenue streams? A great example of that would be in this shift from in restaurant dining to takeout. A lot of people have started working with delivery services. Great. I mean, they take care of that key partner box of getting the food delivered, but suddenly you're introducing a very new and significant part to your cost structure. And you actually may lose money on delivered food as opposed to, breaking even or making a little bit of money when it was, people actually take out or are dining in. So this quickly kind of lets us understand that. And then the 4th sort of risk is the sort of external risks around the environment, regulation, competition. But for these big 3, we can use the canvas for sure.
Yeah, I think, risk is huge right now for many businesses. They are trying to avoid risk or anything that might be the tipping point in pivoting. They want to make sure the pivots they make are going to be positive, right? So this is a great opportunity to analyze those. One of the questions that just came to mind as you were talking about that, if you're a small business and you're working through one of these and you get stuck, how do you get feedback on if you're doing it right? And
right. So I think there's a couple of key things. One is, and I stressed it earlier, really do work with a physical version of the tool. Use the Post-its and not just try and do it in your head or even doing it in an online document. There's something about doing it physically. There's also something about doing it with a group of people who may have different perspectives because they tend to force you to get to what are the key items as opposed to just kind of going down rabbit holes because you're only doing it on your own. And then I think, being willing to share it with people and get their feedback. But I like to say it's a team sport if we really do it well.
Yeah, I think I love the idea of doing it with a group of people. And although we're remote, you demonstrated a great way to still work through things remotely, and people can still get together and get feedback. And you missed a chance to plug the SBDC there. You can also work with a.
Oh yeah, well that would be where you would get your mentor, your consultant could help you. Many of our SBDC consultants are trained in these tools. Increasingly using them, I think, to supplement the classic help me write a business plan type of consultation. Yeah, and even when I'm working with someone virtually, I'll just take a picture of the finished canvas and send it to them in an email so they can recreate it on their end.
Yeah. So, well, I think we can finish up a few minutes early. I want to thank you for joining us. And we actually should have online, both on Facebook and here in the chat, we've dropped a link to finding the business model canvas if you want to print one out and you want to add your Post-its to it and work through one yourself and then get with a business consultant and review it. These are great tools on how to connect with and work through your business model canvas. So again, thank you, Tim. I saw your LinkedIn picture. advisor. He's an advisor helping organizations master innovation and growth. He's from the Widener SBDC, and you know, not only a fun topic, but also very knowledgeable. So thank you so much, Tim, for joining us.
It's been great. As you can tell, I think this is a pretty cool tool, and hopefully folks get a chance to use it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you know, if you're listening to this, you're welcome to reach out to us, and we can give you some copies. We can work through one with you. That's what we specialize in the SBDC. So definitely connect with your SBDC. Coming up next week on Quick Connect, we'll be kind of building on these same topics over the next 3 weeks. Next week, we'll be talking about testing business ideas. And I actually have Annie Hughes from our SBDC, but also in a dual role who works at the Harrisburg Launchbox. She's going to be talking about testing business ideas. Another individual who's very passionate about these lean business strategies. So if you want to continue building on this idea of lean business planning and lean business strategies, join us next week. We'll be doing testing business ideas. And then, as I said, if you're interested in connecting with us and working through a Canvas or just connecting with us for any of your business needs, we are available to connect with at sbdc.psu.edu or through email sbdc@psu.edu, or our phone number that you see there as well. We are working remote, so you won't find us in our offices, but we are, we've gotten pretty savvy at using remote technology to consult with our clients. So definitely connect with us. As you saw with Tim sharing, you know, his Canvas and working that way, we are using all sorts of tools to advise our businesses. So definitely reach out to us, connect, and we would love to help you out. So thank you for joining us on Quick Connect today. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Keep up to date with everything that's going on. We also drop a lot of local resources for our network in there, so follow us on those platforms. All right, well, we're going to end a few minutes early today. If you have any questions, connect with us, and we'll see you next week for testing business ideas.